Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the medium in the middle. This podcast is going to walk you through my journey into mediumship and how I came to realize that I could communicate with souls that have passed over. My adventure started just over a year ago when unusual situations started happening to me. It wasn't until I really started to pay attention to them that it all started to come together. I wrote down everything that I was experiencing this past year in a little black book, and this podcast is going to be a recap of all of those memories leading up to where I am today in my mediumship journey. I will be releasing new episodes every Tuesday, and I recommend listening to the podcast in order, starting with episode 1, as my story will unfold more week by week. If you would like to stay connected with me, follow me on Instagram at mediuminthemiddle. Before we begin, I want to put a disclaimer that I have changed the names and or relationships of the people mentioned in this podcast to protect everyone's privacy. However, all details of the story remain the same. Without further ado, let's jump right into episode 1. I'm going to start my story not at the very beginning, but at my first big experience that happened to me. I will go back in future episodes and explain all the little nitty-gritty small experiences that happened, but up until this point, nothing made sense. So I'm going to have you, my audience, experience what I was going through the same way I experienced it. So once I started to piece things together, you will also start to piece things together. So I'm just going to set the scene of where I am in my life at this time. I am a Reiki level 2 practitioner. So Reiki is energy healing, and I have taken my level 1 and my level 2 course at this time. During my level 2 course, my Reiki master Lois mentioned to me about a crystal healing course, and I was really interested in learning more about crystals at this time, so I decided to take the course with her. So we are the night before my crystal healing course. I'm in bed with my partner at the time. For this series, we're going to call him Joe. And I'm just about to doze off when I find myself in this dream-like state. So it felt kind of like a daydream. I knew I was still awake, but I was on the verge of sleep. We all kind of know that feeling. I was there, and I started to see this man. And it was a man wearing a brown hat. It was similar to a fedora. His hair was long enough out the sides of the hat I would see his hair. He had a mustache, and he was wearing a brown checkered shirt. He looked kind of like Joe's late grandfather, who had passed away before Joe was even born. And there was just this image of this man in a brown hat. And at the time, Joe's brother was going to Italy the next day. So I was just kind of thinking about his grandfather and his brother going to Italy, so didn't really think anything of it. Then this image in my head started to move these glass windows, and he was handing them to someone else, but the person he was handing them to, I couldn't see. And he was moving these glass window planes, they were handing them to each other, and it was just this weird kind of dream. So I turned and I said, "Joe, did your grandpa used to always wear a brown hat? Like, was he known for wearing a brown hat?" Joe was kind of like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "I don't know. I see this man in my dream, and I think it might be your grandpa." He's like, "No, I don't really think he used to wear a brown hat." I was like, "Okay." I lay back down, and the man is still moving these window planes in kind of my mind's eye. And he says to me, "Con Luigi." And Luigi is Joe's grandpa's name. So I was like, "Joe, what does con mean?" I was like, "This man is telling me con Luigi. Does that mean I am Luigi?" And Joe speaks a little bit of Italian, and he said, "No, that means with Luigi." And I was like, "Are you sure your grandpa never used to wear a brown hat? And he's moving glass windows with someone. What's happening here? Like, who is this guy?" And Joe was very confused. He didn't know what was happening either. And he was like, "Do you mean grass? You know my grandpa used to move grass. He had a sod farm, not glass." And I was like, "No, like he's for sure moving glass windows. He's wearing a brown hat. He has a brown checkered shirt. He has a mustache. His hair's coming out the side of his hat. He's moving these windows. Kind of like a funny guy. He keeps doing this ha ha ha. Like he's almost laughing at me or mocking me. I was like, is that kind of your grandpa's personality? Would he be like, ha 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 kind of thing? Steph, just go to bed. You have to get up early tomorrow. I was like, okay, well, can you just ask your brother if he has a picture of your grandpa wearing a brown hat? Because maybe the message is that he's supposed to take that picture with him to Italy tomorrow. Like maybe that's why I'm dreaming about him. He was like, okay, like I'll have him look for a photo. The next morning, I wake up to go to my crystal healing course, and on my phone, I have a picture that Joe's brother had sent me of their grandpa in the brown hat, and it didn't look like the man in my mind's eye or my dreamlike state, but I kind of just took it for, okay, maybe that was the message. He has the picture. He's off to Italy. I'll ask Lois when I see her at my course. So I get to the course, and I explain what kind of happened the night before to Lois. And I told her that I didn't really understand what was going on, but these weird things have been happening to me. So I explained to her that the week before I was coming home from work, and I always came in through the garage. Open the garage door, I walk in through the garage door to the house. As soon as I walked in the house, I heard this loud sound as if a massive painting fell off the wall. And we don't have any large paintings on the wall, so I was really scared and I ran out of my house. I ran back into my car and I called my neighbor. And I said, hey, you need to come to my house right now. I think someone's in my house. Like I just came home from work and someone's in my house. You need to come. He said, all right, I'm at the gym right now, but I'm going to be home in 10 minutes. So I sat in my car and I waited. And when my neighbor came over, I made him go to every room of the house, check every door, check every closet, and nothing was fallen over and nothing was on the ground. And he said, no one's in here. Like, I think you're okay. And I was like, all right, like that was weird. I 1000% heard like the loudest thing fall as soon as I opened the door. And kind of odd things were happening like that to me up until this point. There's a few other instances that I will cover in future episodes, but it was just kind of weird things like that were starting to get my attention. Another one of the biggest things that was happening to me was when I was in the shower, I would be washing my hair, and my eyes would be closed, and I would feel as if someone took their hands and covered my eyes, so it would become really dark. And in my mind, I just thought, oh, maybe the lights are flickering. Maybe the power went out, or you don't really think about what else it could be. But then when it happened 5 or 6 times during my shower, I started to get weirded out. So now I was on edge when I was in the shower. I was on edge when I was home alone because I would be hearing these weird noises. And when I got to the crystal healing course, I kind of explained to Lois all of these other things that have been happening to me, and then what had happened the night before with this vision, if you want to call it. And she was kind of like, well, I have a deck of cards. Let me grab them and maybe they can help us. So she brings back this deck of cards and she lays them all out in front of me and she tells me to touch every single one of the cards while they're face down. So she said, you have to put your energy on all the cards. So I touch all of the cards and she says, now we're going to pull 3 cards, and the 3 cards are going to help us explain who this man was in your vision last night. I said, okay. We pull the first card, and she says, this card means that the person is for your partner. I was like, yeah, we kind of got that far. Pull the next card. She says, this card means that this person is from the past. I said, okay, that also makes sense because this person would have been passed away, whoever this man is with Joe's grandpa. And then the third card we pulled said that this man was a builder or a worker. And I said, okay, that also makes sense because Joe's family had built a hotel and they all kind of worked together building that. So these cards really didn't answer my questions about what was going on because it gave me information that we already pieced together at this point. And after that, Lois didn't really have any more insight. She is a Reiki master, she told me. And if this was a spirit trying to communicate with me, she really didn't know how to deal with that because that wasn't her realm. And I was confused and I said, all right, thank you for your help. And I didn't really know what else to do. So we went on with the course, and the crystal healing course that I took, it taught us how to attune crystals to our chakras. So we learned what each crystal, how it connected to each chakra, and then we learned how to use a pendulum, how to ask the pendulum questions, how to get it to say yes or no. And once the crystal was attuned to your chakras, the pendulum would explain to you what's going on in your chakra, and then we kind of learned how if it swung to the right, it meant this. If it swung to the left, it meant this. If it swung left to right, right to left, up and down, all these different things. So we're going through the attunement process and also working with our pendulum. So we start on the crown chakra, and my pendulum's swinging in the way that the sheet of paper says that it means that my chakra is closed. So I confirmed with Lois. I said, Lois, can my chakra be closed? And she said, yeah, like that's normal. Your chakra is open and closed depending on what's going on. Just keep moving on and check how your other chakras are doing. I say, okay. I move on to my third eye and my throat and my heart and my solar plexus and my sacral. And they all kind of move left to right or right to left, and they tell me what's going on with them. And I'm starting to get used to my pendulum now. And then I'm on my root chakra, and again, it tells me that my root is closed. And we were all just discussing with each other about our chakras, and I said, oh, my root is also closed. And Lois kind of looks at me, she's like, oh, that's interesting. Your crown chakra and your root chakra are closed. She's like, I've never experienced that before and had anyone have their crown and their root closed. She's like, it's normal for different chakras to be closed, but when your crown and your root are closed, it kind of means that you're festering energy or something big is happening, that both your ends are not open. So you're not connected up and you're not grounded down. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, maybe that kind of makes sense with what I'm experiencing. So she says, let me go grab another deck of cards. I want you to pull another card. So she says, for this deck of cards, I just need you to shuffle the cards and you'll know when it's your card because it'll just pop out of the deck. I said, all right. So I start shuffling the cards, and then I kind of looked at Lois. I was like, how will I know when it's my card? And as we're speaking, she said, you'll just know your card will turn over. One card gets stuck and flips over so that in my right hand I have a card that's facing me. And she says, stop, that's your card. And the card says encoded. So she gets the book and she reads me the meaning of the card, which I will read to you now. The card says, where others see nothing, you see the deeper meaning or message hidden within. Your guides are working to communicate with you as your intuition and inner knowing expands. Be mindful of all that you are experiencing in each moment. Be aware of animal messengers, cloud formations, colors, conversations of others, and anything else that catches your attention. You are taking the next step up in awareness and connection to the unseen world. And Lois says, oh, I've never had anyone pull that card before. So at this point in my training, 2 weird things have happened. I got a little bit of clarity about what's going on. I, at this point, kind of think dead people are trying to communicate with me, but I don't know what that means or what that looks like. I wasn't even thinking at this point, oh boy, I'm a medium. Like, it was all very confusing. So I take that information and I leave the course. And on my drive home, I immediately called Joe to tell him about everything that happened, the cards that I pulled, what Lois said. And as I'm rambling on the phone, I just start saying that we have to meet at his mother's house because at his mother's house, there's shoe boxes of pictures. And in the shoebox of pictures is the photo of the man that I was talking about the night before. And Joe kind of goes silent and he says, how do you know that there's a shoebox of photos at my mom's house? And I was like, I don't know. I just know that we need to go to your mom's and we need to look at this shoebox of photos. And he said, well, my mom's not home right now, so we'll just come home and we'll go later. And I was very adamant. I was like, no, like, we have a key to your mom's house. We need to go there right now. I have this pendulum that I just learned how to use, and I need to find the photo of the man that's in my mind because we know that it's not your grandpa. So reluctantly, Joe agrees to meet me at his mom's house, and the 2 boxes of photos are right on the table when we get in. And we start to look through them. And I describe the man again. I say, okay, we're looking for a man with a brown hat that kind of looks like a fedora, but it's not. His hair comes out the side. He has a mustache, and he's wearing a brown checkered shirt. So he's looking through one box. I'm looking through another box. And every time we find a man, he would show me him. No, that doesn't look like him. Kind of looks like him. Taller than this guy. And all of a sudden, we find this photo that is exactly what I described. The man has this cute little hat on. He has a mustache. His hair comes out the side. He's wearing a brown checkered shirt. And I say to Joe, that's the man I saw. That is exactly what I saw in my mind. Who's that man? And Joe said, I'm actually not quite sure who this man is. So he sends a photo of the photo to his aunt. And he says, hey, who is this guy? And she texts us back and she says, oh, that's your grandpa's cousin. So we said, okay, so now we know that the man in my dream was Joe's grandpa's cousin. So I take the photo home with me, and now we kind of are piecing together more pieces of the puzzle. We go back home. We're both kind of confused about what's been happening, but we start to make dinner. And at this time, Joe's aunt calls us back. And she says, oh my gosh, I finally realized what the story is of my dad and his uncle moving the glass windows. And she said, about 2 weeks ago, I was at her mom's house, who would have been Joe's grandpa's wife. So they're it's grandma and grandpa. And she said, across the street from mom's house, the neighbors are selling their house. So we went over across the street to just go talk to the neighbors. And while we were across the street at the neighbor's house, we were looking back onto mom's house. And she was saying, we never really see the house from this angle because we always pull in the driveway and go right in. And as they're talking to the neighbors, and they see that one of the front window on the grandmother's house was different than every other house on the block. So she kind of goes to her mom, hey mom, like, why is your window different than everyone else's front window? And she said, oh, when the kids were younger, they broke the front window, so your daddy changed it. And she said, oh, and what about the house on the left? They also changed their window. She said, oh, like that was where Luigi's brother or cousin lived. And she said, they helped each other fix the window on our house, and then they liked it so much, they changed the window on his house too. And his aunt kind of paused, and she said, I didn't know that story until 2 weeks ago. And I wouldn't have known that story unless we were across the street looking back at mom's house about a story that they shared together, fixing each other's windows. So at this point, it all pieced together, and nothing still really made sense. It was just, okay, I had this dreamlike vision where your grandpa and his cousin were moving windows, and that story ended up being true. And then we did find the picture at your mom's house of the guy who looked like the person I described. And I didn't really know where to take it from there. It was kind of an experience that you could just enough pass off as coincidence or just something weird. So I didn't really know what to do with that information. This is where I'm going to end episode 1. This was the first bigger incident that happened. And at this point, I didn't really know what to think of it, what to make of it. I had all these little pieces of information and small things that were happening. This was the first bigger instance that kind of came to fruition. So this is where I'm going to end this episode. In episode 2, we're going to go over the next experience that happened to me. And the second one was the big one. It was the big slap in the face, the one with too many details, too much information. That next one is the one that really started to get me thinking, okay, what's going on here? This happened and this happened and this happened. And then things started to make sense. So thank you for listening to episode 1. We are just at the beginning of my journey, and I hope that you will follow along to see what happened to me next and over the past year, what has been happening. I am going to post the photo that we found in the shoebox, and I'm also going to post the picture of the card that I pulled. I'm going to post that on Instagram if you're interested in having a look. If you are interested in following along in my story, please subscribe. These first 3 episodes will give you the base of the story, and then we start to go into all the details. I will take you back to before this story happened to explain all the other little things that started to happen that will make sense once we're at that point. So again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.